Marsha, have you ever thought about how sectarianism and nationalism affect people? They seem to play a big role in dividing or uniting communities.
Yes, Sarah. Sectarianism is when people are overly attached to their group, like a religion or political party, and treat others unfairly or even harm them because they don't belong to that group.
Exactly. The Cambridge Dictionary says it's about strong support for your group, which may cause problems between different groups. It often leads to things like violence, discrimination, or exclusion.
And nationalism is about loyalty to your country. It can bring people together with a shared identity, but it can also cause problems like excluding minorities or promoting aggressive policies.
Yeah, that is why I find this topic so interesting. Roots of division, how sectarian and nationalist identities shape grassroots expressions. These identities are both sources of unity and division.
True, Azmi Bishara explains that sectarianism isn't just about religion or culture. It's often created by politics. For examples, in Lebanon and Iraq, colonial powers built political systems around sectarian divisions, which still cause problems today.
Rick Neo talks about something similar in Saudi Arabia. The government treats Sheikh communities as threats to national unity. This justifies discrimination and exclusion, which causes these groups to fight back.
Yes, when groups face injustice, they organize at the grassroots level to push for change and fight inequalities.
Nationalism makes this even more complicated. Harish and Maya Tudor explain how modern states use nationalism to create unity, but they often prioritize the majority and also exclude the minority.
That's true. Grassroots groups sometimes use nationalist ideas to make their case, but governments can also use nationalism to divide people by labeling minorities as outsiders.
Social media plays a big role in all of this. It helps grassroots activists share their ideas and challenge government narrative. But it can also spread hateful or divisive messages.
Right, it's a double-edged sword. Bishara also explains the difference between Ta'ifa, a sect as a group, and Ta'fiyah, sectarianism as a political tool. Governments often use sectarianism to stay in power, like in Syria.
And international politics makes things harder. Neo talks about how the rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran influences the local groups. Grassroots movements have to deal with these bigger conflicts while trying to stand up for themselves.
Marginalized groups often use their sectarian or nationalist identities to resist exclusion and demand fairness.
That's why I've been thinking about these research questions. The first one is, what are the main features of sectarianism and nationalism? The second one, how do social media and globalization affect nationalist ideas? The third one, how does nationalism shape grassroots movements? And the last one is, how do sectarian and nationalist identities influence the grassroots resistance?
Great questions. How will you research them?
I'm reviewing articles by Bishara, Neo, Milenas, and Tudor, along with other studies. I'll focus on how sectarianism and nationalism are formed and how they show up in the society.
That's smart. Are you looking at themes like how politics create sectarianism, how minorities are treated, and how nationalism impacts identity?
Yes, I'll also compare ideas from these studies and use real examples from Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, and Syria. This will help identify gaps in research and suggest future studies.
You're right. There isn't enough research on how sectarianism shapes nationalism in specific regions. Comparing different contexts could help a lot.
Exactly. I also want to offer practical advice for how societies can promote unity while respecting differences.
It's such an important topic. Sectarianism focuses on smaller group identities, while nationalism focuses on the larger group. Balancing those is key to peace.
Governments, medias, and education play big roles here. They can reduce divisions by promoting inclusion, but exclusionary policies make things worse.
I completely agree. Understanding these issues can help create more stable and fair societies.
That's of our research to find better ways to manage sectarian and nationalist issues and build more inclusive communities.
I'm excited to see where our research goes, Sarah. It's such valuable work. To know further, let's dive deeper into the topic by
Discussing about literature review by Miss Rina.
Thank you, Sarah and Marsha. Assalamualaikum everyone, I am Ms. Rina and I'm going to continue talking about some interesting ideas about sectarianism and nationalism based on recent researches. First, let's talk about Azmi Bishara's Sectarianism Without Sex, 2021. Bishara challenges the common belief that sectarian conflict in the Arab world is simply about religious differences. He argues that sectarianism isn't natural or inevitable. It's created by political power struggles with modern states. Bishara makes an important distinction. A sect or a taifa is a social group, while sectarianism or taifiyya is when political actors use sectarian identities to gain power. He also critiques the idea that sectarian identities are ancient and unchanging. Instead, he shows that state building and colonialism turned religious differences into political tools. For example, colonial powers institutionalized sectarian divisions in Lebanon and Iraq, leading to long-lasting conflicts. Bishara's concept of imagined sects highlights how authoritarian regimes like Syria's use sectarian language to maintain control. Although some say his work lack detailed examples, his focus on politics rather than religion provides a fresh and powerful perspective. Now, let's move to Rick Neo's article, Religious Secularization and Institutionalized Sectarianism in Saudi Arabia. Neo uses secularization theory to explain how Saudi leaders frame Shiism as a threat to national unity. By portraying the Shia minority as a danger, they justify discrimination. This marginalization affects education, where Shiites' history is ignored, and employment, where Shiites are excluded from public service. Neo also connects this to the broader Saudi-Iran rivalry, which deepens the repression. While Neo provides a solid analysis, he focuses more on the action of elites than on how everyday people experience or resist sectarianism. Future research could explore how ordinary Shiites are in Saudi Arabia navigate these challenges using methods like interviews and community studies. Finally, we turn to Harris Melinas and Maya Tudor's overview of nationalism in their article, Nationalism, What We Know and We Still Need to Know. They discuss key theories like those of Ernest Gellner and Benedict Anderson, who link nationalism to industrialization and print media. These modernist thinkers replace earlier views that nations are ancient and natural. They also mention Anthony D. Smith's idea, ethno-symbolism, which shows how older cultural symbols influence modern nationalism. Melinas and Tudor argue that we need more research on how nationalism affects everyday life. They also highlight the need for studies on how globalization and social media shape nationalist ideas. Digital platforms, they say, both mobilize movements and challenge traditional narratives. Understanding these forces can help us see how nationalism evolves today. Now, let's think about what all this means. Bishara and Neo both focus on how political elites use sectarianism for power, but they don't give us a clear picture of how ordinary people live with these identities. How do sectarian divides affect friendships, families, or local communities? How do social media and informal networks spread or fight sectarianism? These questions could add depth to the analysis. Bishara also overlooks how sectarianism intersects with class, gender, and ethnicity. For example, in Lebanon, economic inequality often overlaps with sectarian divisions, making things more complicated. Exploring these connections would create richer understanding. Neo's work could benefit from a closer look at religious leaders' roles. How do clerics spread securitized ideas through sermons and teachings? This could reveal more about how sectarian control is maintained. Melinas and Tudor's call for more research into everyday nationalism is crucial. we need to understand how people internalize nationalist ideas in their daily life. Comparative studies across regions and times can show us patterns and unique cases. And with globalization and social media reshaping our world, it's essential to study how these forces influence nationalism. Social media can spread nationalist rhetoric, but it can also challenge it in new ways. In summary, these works challenge us to rethink how we understand secularism and nationalism. They remind us that these concepts are shaped with politics and power, not just religion or culture. But they highlight the importance of looking beyond elites to everyday experiences. By filling in these gaps, we can gain a fuller, more nuanced picture of identity and conflict in today's world. Thank you, and I will pass to Adalia Raisha.
Thank you, Sister Nisrina, for that. Now let's move on to my part, which is about the solution to the problems on how sectarianism as well as nationalism had happened in our country. So the first thing is that we should know that sectarianism can actually occur due to the separation of Muslims. So due to that, most of the Muslims actually had a separation and also neglection towards each other, and this could actually occur violence and also injustice towards each other. So due to that, you can actually solve it by create a conference to open up towards them about their knowledge, and through this education about their own sects, it actually can help them in understanding better towards other sectarianism. So due to this, every Muslim can actually help each other by understanding of each sect to prevent us from any miscommunication or misunderstanding. And we should actually acknowledge that these all Muslims are still the same Muslim. So by opening up a conference, we can actually open up a wide knowledge towards these people, so that we don't have any violence and also injustice towards those kind of sectarianism. Now let's move on to the second solution, which is to unite all the Muslims into one community as a widespread Muslim in all country. This is to actually help them creating a strong bond and also to strengthen them in very helpful guidance. So due to this, we can actually help them in guiding them into the right path, and help them to acknowledge more about the right or the truth of the revelation that which have been shared from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then for the last part, to sum up about the solution of the problems, we can actually help each other by not neglecting them, but to provide and also to help them in gathering all the Muslims, since all Muslims is all the same, to help them in having a misconception of Islam, and also to help them in being in the right path of Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and also help them in being one of us to prevent from any misunderstanding. So I think that's all for the solution part. Now let's move on to the supporting evidence that we can see from the perspective of Quran and also Sunnah. Alright, so now let's move on to the supporting evidence from Sunnah and also Quran. So the first thing is that from the Quran, Surah Al-Imran, verse 103, where it mentioned that and hold firmly together to the rope of Allah, and do not be divided. Remember, Allah favors upon you where you were enemies, then He united your hearts, so you by His grace became brothers, and you were at the brink of fiery pits, and He saved you from it. This is how Allah makes His revelation clear to you, so that you may be rightly guided. So basically, from this ayah, we can see that each brotherhood in Muslim needs to create a strong bonding to each other, so that every single one of us can be united and can be in the right path. So due to that, we need to not separate or divide each Muslims, as to all Muslims are should be in the same guidance, and also this can actually help each other to actually strengthening our bond as a Muslim. So the second ayah is about from Surah 49, it is Surah Al-Hujurat, verse 10, which is the believers are but one brotherhood. So make peace between your brothers and be mindful of Allah, so you may be shown mercy. So basically, from this ayah, it can be mentioned that reconciliation within brotherhood can actually help Muslims to unite with all of us, and it's actually very helpful so that we can understand more about the right guidance and also the right path. And for the last one is about the hadith from Sunan al-Tirmidhi. It shows that Prophet ﷺ revealed the cause that makes the split or the sectarianism happen between Ummah, which is the specific part that only the truth can join him in the Jannah. So this hadith mentioned about, indeed the children of Israel split into 72 sects, and my Ummah will split into 73 sects. All of them are in the fire except for one. And then someone asked him, and which is it, O Messenger of Allah? He said, what I am upon and my companions. So basically on this hadith, they mentioned that only one set that follow him and also the right guidance of the revelation can actually enter the Jannah easily. And also we shall not forget all the sets that are not in the right path, because we can actually help them into making them in the right path. So that's basically all about spotting evidence from the Quran and also from the Hadith. Alright, so now let's move on to the findings and also the results. So based on this research paper of the methodology, I can actually see about 3 key findings from this paper. So the first thing is about the formation between the sectarianism and as well as the nationalism. So the sectarianism identities are usually being controlled by the government. This is due to maintain their power or their control, so that they can actually provide them in very cruelty and also injustice towards these sects. And then the second thing is about the nationalism. So basically, from the study of Harris, Mylan, and as well as Maya Tida, they already highlighted that the sense of neglection that happened in nationalism in Islam due to the separation or the division of each sect. So this can actually be seen from the Saudi Arabia, which they would outcast the Shia as an outsider and never include them as a Muslim in their country. So now let's move on to the second key finding. Alright, so now let's move on to the second key finding. So basically it's about the exchange of sectarianism at the grassroots levels. So basically in this part, we can actually see that most of the sectarianism has faced a lot of struggling in their life, especially towards through the community engagement, through the social parties, and as well education system. Due to this, they actually are facing a lot of problems and also struggles towards their life, as to why most of people would neglect and also reject them in their life. So this could actually make them become an outcast towards the Muslim society and actually can destroy them. And due to this, they are already being normalized with the being as a marginalized group into this kind of society. So now let's move on to the last key finding. Alright, so now let's move on to the last key finding, which is about the communication or the interaction between these both concepts, which are the sectarianism as well as nationalism. So this is to develop the reinforcement between division that are aligned with their base of their country. So basically most of this country usually exclude this kind of sects of Muslims because it can occur to them something like a violence or any chaos. But for this study, we can actually help them into creating a strong bonding towards each Muslim, and it's actually can help them into guiding in the right path. So that's all for the 3 key findings, and now let's move on to the last part, which is about the result of this key finding. So based on these 3 key findings, you can actually came out with the outcome that most of this sectarianism as well as nationalism is actually being politically structured and also frequently being used to create some chaos or any violence towards other people. So due to this, we can actually overcome it by trying to do further research on this particularly excluded group, so that we can actually learn more on how they can actually be in the same community as same as us, so that they are not being excluded and also they are not being neglected, as to why, as I mentioned before in the Quran, we need to unite all Muslims together and reassure that we all in the same path. So that's all from my part. Now let's move on to the last part, which is the conclusion that will be presented by Sister Mish.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Siti Nuramisha binti Nur Azidi with metric number 2218646. Alright, let's talk through the key points and recommendations from this study on sectarianism and nationalism. It's such a relevant topic because these two forces are so deeply connected, especially in shaping grassroots movement. On one hand, nationalism can bring people together under a shared identity, but on the other, it can lead to marginalizing minority groups, which only deepens divisions. We can see this clearly in places like Saudi Arabia and Syria, where sectarian identities are actively manipulated by political actors to maintain power and control. Another layer to this is the role of social media. It's fascinating how technology has empowered marginalized groups, giving them a platform to challenge dominant narratives. But at the same time, it can be a double-edged sword. Social media can also amplify polarizing content and fuel further division. So while it's a powerful tool for change, it requires careful and responsible use. For the Islamic perspective, this whole issue of sectarian division is deeply problematic. The Quran and Hadith emphasize unity and brotherhood. For instance, in Surah Al-Hujurat, verse 10, Allah reminds us that believers are one brotherhood and calls for reconciliation among them. Islam is clear about the importance of avoiding division and fostering harmony. So, what can be done? First, inclusive nationalism is crucial. Governments need to create policies that represent everyone, regardless of culture or religion, and move away from rhetoric that excludes minorities. Dialogue is also key. Educational initiatives and open discussions can help clear up misconceptions between groups, and religious leaders have a crucial role in emphasizing unity and coexistence. Then there's the role of social media. If used responsibly, it can amplify positive narratives and counter divisive ideologies, but we also need to address the harmful content that spreads so easily on this platform. And beyond that, systematic reforms are needed, particularly in areas like education, employment, and governance, to tackle the inequalities that fuel tensions. Lastly, I think ongoing research and collaboration are essential. Scholars, policymakers, and community leaders need to come together to develop innovative solutions tailored to the needs of different regions. Ultimately, it's about prioritizing unity, justice, and inclusivity. If we focus on this principle, not only can we address the negative impacts of sectarianism and nationalism, but we can also foster stronger and more cohesive communities. It's a challenge, but one that's definitely worth pursuing. Okay, that's all from me. Thank you.